Welcome to the A Little More You podcast. This is the space for women navigating change, for souls who feel the quiet pull towards something deeper, something softer, something a little more true. I'm Kendra, and I'm honored to walk your path. In today's episode, we're going to talk about going into the depths before we make decisions about direction. In the last few days in my world, I've been facilitating some new workshops lately and just in conversations in co-working environments that I haven't been in. There's been a lot of conversation about how when people meet me, we tend to go deep pretty quick. And that's partly because I introduce myself with my story and my story of grief and loss and going through the experience of losing my daughter who was stillborn 11 years ago. And I joked with someone and I was like, I should really put "she goes to the depths" on my website because I really do. I don't like small talk. I enjoy deep, meaningful conversations, and I love to go to the root of why we do the things we do, including myself. And what I've noticed recently in these conversations is that women are really craving some more meaningful conversations. We've spent a lot of time in our lives, and if you're a busy woman and you're overloaded and you're just trying to figure things out and how to balance it all, you may not have a lot of space or time for deep, meaningful conversations. But I think we're all craving that. I think we're all looking for it. So that's what I'm hoping to bring to this conversation today is a little bit of depth and some recommendations on how to go deep before you start setting your directions for your goals or your life or your resolutions or whatever it is you're trying to maybe go do in life, is to pause and go deep first. Like I said, a lot of women are busy, overwhelmed, trying to figure it all out. How do we balance all this? And I just want to acknowledge, first of all, that we live in a world where we are being constantly bombarded in ways that we never have been in the history of the human race. And so give yourself a little grace. Let's start there. But we're all trapped in these superficial conversations and endless advice about how to manage it all. We're told that we should be grateful for the lives that we have and that it could be worse. And so just keep doing what you're doing and eventually you'll feel happy. The takeaway from all that noise coming in at us is that we should be able to handle all of it. And if we're not handling it all, then we're failing. Or that we should be able to do all the things. And if you can't, there's something wrong with you if you can't keep up. Or maybe you're internalizing this idea of your life looks good. I shouldn't feel sad or depressed or unhappy or unfulfilled. I shouldn't feel unfulfilled because my life is pretty good in comparison to other people. My life is pretty good. All that turns into so much internal tension and anxiety and self-doubt. We live in a world that's really obsessed with strategies, 5 steps, 10 hacks, one right way to do things. But rarely do we pause and ask ourselves, how does that thing feel in my soul? How does my soul feel about me going and doing all of that? I'm recording this episode in January, so as you can imagine, there are tons of conversations about goals and resolutions right now. And here's my thought to share with you. Not advice, not recommendation. Actually, it's just a thought. What if we decided that before we set our direction for what's next in our life, we went to the depths of what's happening inside of us? So today's episode is all about depth before direction. So what happens when we set our direction without taking a moment to go to the depths of our soul and think about and acknowledge and witness and recognize what our soul is saying? What happens when we don't do that? And you can tell me in the comments whether or not any of this resonates with you if you're feeling any of this. In our fast-paced world, we often set goals pretty quickly. If you've ever worked in a tech environment, I used to be a consultant in those worlds. There's this conversation about go real fast, iterate, break things. And while I think that's great for that environment, I don't know that it works for our humanness. We make decisions really fast, and oftentimes in our human life, we do it by gathering perspectives from multiple different outside sources. We survey our friends and our family and ask them, what should I do? And then we end up setting our direction based on what everyone else thinks we should do. And we look for all those answers outside of ourselves. Like when I decided to get my master's degree because my boss said it would be a good idea. Here I am, thousands of dollars later, sleepless nights in my 20s, sacrificing my weekends. And I have a degree, yes. And don't get me wrong, my degree has served me. I found a program I really liked. But the question is, was it really my desire? Is that where I wanted to spend my money and effort, was on that program to get me further in a job that here I am at, let's say 20 years later, and that's not even really my passion or interest? I couldn't have known that then. We make the best decisions we can at the time, and I get that. But I want to make choices and decisions in my life from a different place moving forward. Direction without depth can feel eventually empty and frankly exhausting. Like I remember driving to school after work, sitting in the parking lot, taking a nap before class. And it's not the effort that was wrong. Like, effort is good. Sometimes it's really worth it. But it's only worth it, in my knowledge. It's only worth it if it's something that you actually want to go do. Otherwise, if it's something you're doing because somebody else said you should, it's draining and it's exhausting. And you end up on the other side depleted instead of exhilarated. For example, I did some workshops this weekend. They were the first that I ever held space for a long period of time for a larger group than I'm used to holding space for. And I was exhausted when it was over. I was tired. I was emotionally drained. But let me tell you, by the time I rested, I took my evening to rest and to recoup. By the end of the next day, I was completely revived and invigorated. This is definitely something I want to keep doing. So there's definitely a difference between choosing to be and work and do things in spaces that are of your own choice and have come from the depths of your wisdom. So what do I actually mean when I say go deep, or what is depth? For many of us, what we're chasing in life comes from outside of ourselves. It comes from our parents, our teachers, our society saying, this is the path you should go. This is the direction you should go. And depth is the opposite of that. Depth is radical honesty with yourself. It's awareness of how your body responds when you're considering different directions and different options and different choices. It's noticing what feels aligned and then noticing what feels like tension. Depth isn't about what's going on in your head, in your mind. There's value in knowledge and understanding in our minds, but many times our minds aren't necessarily putting us on the path that is most true to ourselves. Depth is not your mind. It speaks from your soul and it resides in your body. Depth is simply connecting with your inner knowing, that part of you that already knows which direction is the truest for you. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the easiest for you. And a lot of times these decisions that are aligned with our inner wisdom and inner knowledge, and many times they're not the quote unquote easiest. They're not the easiest decision to make because they're probably going to ruffle some feathers. They may disrupt your life. They may mean sacrifice, hard conversations. So I don't want to dismiss the fact that if you follow your truth, that it's all going to be easy. It's not necessarily easy, but it feels better. It feels more aligned. It feels like your truth. It feels right, even though it's hard. Okay. So, if you've ever read or listened to anything by Martha Beck, she calls this coming to our senses versus coming to consensus. So, we're not going to ask everyone around us, what do you think I should do? And if you don't know who Martha Beck is, she's an awesome, very internationally known, well known life coach. And I love this because it just reminds us that we are going to go to the depths of our own senses and our own awareness and our own knowledge about what direction to go rather than relying on everybody externally outside of us to dictate what would make us happy, what would make us joyful, what would make our lives feel meaningful and fulfilling. Because no one else can really know that but you. Everybody's going to have an opinion about what could, but no one really knows what will. So here's what's possible when you start to go deep. When you decide to pause, take a step back, and listen to your inner wisdom first, your choices feel a little clearer. Again, not easier, but clearer maybe. You're like, I know I need to go do this thing. You put the effort in and you're tired. Like I said, when I did my workshops this weekend, I was tired. But you also feel like a little bit on the flip side energized. You're like, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. I know it's draining and I know it's difficult because I'm holding space for women who are grieving and going through loss and going through moments of awakening around the way they've been living and what they want next in their lives. That's some pretty heavy stuff, and it does create some emotional drain, but I know that's where I want to be. Your direction starts to feel natural and aligned. You stop forcing it, you stop trying to get to the outcome, and you start trusting your direction. Direction becomes supportive instead of stressful. So, if you've ever worked in a corporate environment, I come from a corporate environment and I actually taught people SMART goals for years and years. And I thought I needed to use those for myself. But what I felt was that when you had this place that you were supposed to get and it was hard to get there, it felt stressful. So, when we start from the inside, and we know internally what it is that you want to do in life, and you set your direction against that, it's no longer as stressful as maybe it has been if you've been setting your goals and your direction based on everybody else's recommendation. I'll give you another example. My husband and I went through fertility treatments after the loss of our daughter. I had been through a surgery and we had several months of initial treatments. And when those initial treatments didn't work, we were faced with a decision: either stop completely, go the IVF route, or go potentially the adoption route. We went to an informational session about each. And I have to tell you that I left crying after both the adoption and the IVF, but for very different reasons. After the IVF session, I cried because it didn't feel right. And frankly, I was a little disappointed and sad that it didn't feel right because it meant for me that there was a chance that I would never biologically have my own child. Because I knew in my bones I really didn't want to go the IVF route. And for those of you who have no shame, no judgment, again, this is all about making decisions that are right for you. My decision was it wasn't right for me. I was in desperate need to take some time to reflect because if I didn't choose that IVF route, it meant most likely no biological children for me. And for someone who grew up in a very religious family, I had also been told from a very young age that my purpose in life was to have children. And so not only was this decision weighing on me as just what direction am I going and what's right for me from a child perspective, but it was beating up against some old stories that I had been carrying around in my life for a very long time that I needed to reconcile with. So I packed up and went to Bali for 2 weeks. And I know This is an extreme example in a sense that we can't all just pick up and go to Bali when we have to make a decision. But this was a big life decision and butting up against some of my big limiting beliefs that I needed to go reconcile with. So I needed to go to the depths that match the gravity of the situation. Ultimately, I decided against IVF and I released the idea of having biological children. Funny story, the way life works. 7 weeks later, I was pregnant, completely naturally, no effort, no treatments. Now, I'm not saying this happens for everyone, and there are so many women out there who can't have children, and this is not their story. And for those of you who that is, I understand that place, and my heart is with you. But this is an example in my story of what happens when we take the time to rest and to pause and to go deep within ourselves and determine the direction that is most appropriate for us instead of making decisions from external places. I felt like the world was really telling me I needed to go IVF. For me to step back and witness and say, is this really right for me? Was not easy. It was a difficult decision to make. So, how to practice this exploration of depth in everyday life. So I gave you an example of a really big monumental decision in my life, but knowing that we can't all run off to Bali and sometimes our decisions are not that huge. How can we bring a little more depth into your direction on a regular basis? So the first thing is and I feel like every time I talk about any of this, it's give yourself permission to take some space and pause and reflect. Carve out a couple of hours for a coffee date with yourself if that's something that feels good to you. Maybe it is a vacation, depending on the magnitude of the decisions that you're making right now. And frankly, sometimes it's just a few nights a week. Give yourself a minute to just kind of look at what am I doing with my days and do they feel good? It doesn't have to be overly complicated. It's just an invitation to witness. I do have 3, I would say, maybe guideposts you can follow. The first one would be if you find this alone time or you find this quiet space that you can reflect, feel it, check in with your body. Which direction feels like pressure and which one feels like peace? And then you can imagine it. If there were no barriers to your peace, which direction would you go? If there was nothing in your way, no people, no places, no money, nothing in your way, which way would you head? And then there's an opportunity to realize it. And what I mean by realizing it is if your inner knowing is really clear, you know what you need to go do, but you're struggling to go in that direction, this is just an opportunity to check, why am I sacrificing my peace? What is holding me back? So what's the thing that I have to do that feels hard in order to move in this next direction, this direction that is calling me towards more peace or more alignment? Maybe alignment is. What's the thing that I have to do that feels hard? Play it out in your mind or on a page. I am a journaler. I write a lot. There is value in writing things down if that feels good to you. Write down what's the worst thing that could happen if I do that thing. If I say no to the person who has been overstepping boundaries, if I say no to another work event after hours, if I do the thing, what's the worst that can happen? And then ask yourself this last question. Is it worth that to have more alignment in my life, or peace, if you want to call it that? So you don't have to act on any of this right now. I feel like we co-create the manifestation of our future, but right now, in the depths, it's not about action. It's about getting to know yourself and creating awareness around what feels like the right direction for you inside your body, which are all signals from your soul. So our hustle culture will say that you have to push and you have to go fast and you have to iterate. But divine timing says, listen deep and then align. You don't need to rush. You don't need all the answers. You don't need a perfect plan. Listen deep, set your direction, and do your part to take those small intentional actions towards the direction that feels like peace to you, and then surrender to divine timing. As always, when we wrap up this podcast, no action required. Like I said, you just need to notice what resonates with you, what felt true, if anything, and let that guide you gently forward. Thank you for sharing this space with me. Until next time, may your days be guided by your inner wisdom and filled with a little more you.